Trail running isn't just about competition. It's about discovery, pushing your limits, and finding new and exciting places to run. Today, we're diving into how you can take that next step with confidence. My guest today is Zane Schmahl, the race director and founder of George Mountain Ultra Trail, otherwise known as MUT. An experienced trail runner, adventure racer, and events organizer, Zane has explored and built countless routes and taken on some of the toughest ultra distance and adventure races. He's here with me today to share how to navigate new trails safely and step up to your first long race. In this episode, Zane and I dive into how to plan and navigate new trail routes, the mental and physical jump from short runs to long runs, how to pace and fuel for longer distances, and the best way to push your limits without burning out. Zane, welcome to the Trail Chasers.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here and excited for our chat.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Very excited to have you on and to chat more about how you go about getting up to that sort of long race, or what are the things you kind of need to look for, and obviously also to chat about MUT. And then, I think also an important part of what kind of happens after you get to that kind of short race. So with that all in mind, I want to know, when you're kind of on the start line of a race or at the beginning of a kind of trail run, what are you doing? What is going through your mind? Are you the nervous type? Are you the excited type? Are you at the front? Are you at the back?
The first thing that goes through my mind is, have I had enough toilet breaks before the start?
Yeah.
Should I quickly get another coffee and sort it out before we start? I think it depends on the race, what you're doing, and different races have got different ways of building it up and creating that anticipation. And I think on big races, you're always going to be slightly more nervous than the others. And I think my nerves are always in for the unknown, like how far are we going? What is the plan? Have I studied the route profile enough? Do I know how many climbs are going to be in here? And I must be honest, like if you've been doing it for a couple of years, you get sort of into a space where you don't really do all the homework you did previously in a bit more inexperienced time, where you were like set on everything and you think, we'll wing it. But it's always funny, like I think our South African mentality, or you can't really show up and wing a 100-kilometer race. It's not that, but it happens. I see it often. But I'm probably not too nervous. I'm trying to find somebody that I can have a little bit of a nervous chat with in the start shoot, and then just let the gun go, because as soon as you start moving, everything starts settling into a rhythm, and you find your space.
Yeah. So this season is sponsored by Gilnockie Socks, and what we've kind of done is they've done a pair of socks like this with the 2 words. And I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but by the end of the episode, I'd like you to give me your 2 words that you want on the back of your socks. Obviously, it's probably more for the person behind you than it is for yourself, but give it some thought through the episode, and we'll come back to it at the end.
Cool. I'll definitely have a think about what to put on those socks. Yeah.
So without thinking too hard and too deep, what have been the 5 most pivotal moments in your life leading up to this point, life, career, running journey?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's quite a loaded one, but there's been lots of things, and some of it's not necessarily too related to trail running. I think one pivotal moment for me was meeting my wife, because I was your typical double brandy and coke oak in the bar type guy, and she introduced me to adventure sports. She was quite an avid mountain biker at that stage, raced a bit of the South African cross country series and things like that, and I did my very first sort of adventure race, was a mountain bike race, a short race on her bike that I borrowed for it. Wow. And in that race, they had a lucky draw at the end, and I won a bicycle. And like they say, the rest is history. Then I just, the mountain bike scene just bit onto me, and was heavy into mountain biking. Her parents have always been organizing events. They started organizing the Challenback mountain bike race back in 1995.
Wow.
So this year we hosted our 30th event.
Sure.
I still obviously had a full-time job then and was just sort of helping out on weekends with the events and like finding my space. And then the Transbavihans is also one of the events that we organize. And the event grew to such a space where there was space for me to move into the event industry.
Sure.
And that was basically how I got into events and that sort of thing. And through that space, I met a whole bunch of friends in the industry. And I also started taking up trail running. And I thought, this looks like a cool sport to do. So my first race I entered was the Otter, and then realized that, okay, shit, I need to train for this. It's not just a walk in the park. So, and then my trail running journey started, and I absolutely loved it. It was just that, mountain biking is great, and you got the adrenaline of doing the single tracks and going fast, but trail running was just that sense of achievement, being on your own 2 feet and you've gotten into the mountain or wherever you are on your own sort of, accord with your own 2 feet. And that was just magical. And it just the bug bit. And I think around about the same time, 2 things happened for me that was also probably quite a pivotal point. Was I started getting into a group of mates that were doing adventure racing.
Okay.
And they started keep on telling me, come and join us for adventure race, maybe a shorter race, and get into the adventure racing scene. And then I eventually sort of gave in to the request and did a adventure race in the Transkei, which was a shorter race. Nowadays we refer to them as sprint races, but back then I remembered they said we're doing a sprint race of 150 Ks, and I was like, okay, well, it's not really sprint, how fast are we going in 150 Ks, And so I started doing adventure racing on a small level, and then Jacques Mouton, the route director for Matt, him and I also started plotting with ideas for the Outeniqua Mountains, like what can we do. There was trails and things, and him and I were sitting on maps and figuring things out. And we then went and ran a route that we sort of plotted on maps that became the MAT 60 route, which was our flagship route. And I've said this many times in interviews, but it was just him and I running that full lap in, I think 2016 was the first time we ran it. And coming down the mountain after about 50 Ks into the route, I realized that because we thought we'll just do a trail run for the sake of a trail run in George. I mean, Outeniqua Mountains and that, and coming down through the section called Tonelbos. And I remembered saying to myself, this route deserves a proper race. And I mean, we kicked off with 236 athletes in that first year in 2018. But the vision was always to make an international race. So that was, that grew. And then the adventure racing scene was also something that I really enjoyed and kept on going. I think that's about like the pivotal points. Adventure racing grew into a point where we competed in the world champs in 23 with 3 of my other mates in a team, and it was a big race, 900 Ks.
Sure.
We 100 teams of the international sector, and I think we came 13th there. So it was good. It was a complete sufferfest for me, but it was fantastic, and that grew, and Matt's grown to what it is now, where I think we in our 7th year now, and probably looking at around 2,000 athletes this year. So it's and I think at the moment we've got about 45 different countries represented for coming this year to Matt.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's a very quick summary of my sort of little life story into the scene. Yeah, and
obviously you wear a number of hats. So in your what you've kind of talked about now, if you had a kind of business card and you had your name on, and underneath, what would it kind of say?
That is legitimately such a tough thing to answer. Like I've given up. Like people ask me what do you do for a living, and I say I run. I run in mountains, because it's so difficult to explain. And I mean, probably to my own detriment, I've got a bit of an entrepreneurial hat, so I try all sorts of things. And I think for me, it's always been also, I'm very passionate about the Outeniqua mountain range and George specifically, and growing that scene. And I've always looked at ways that we can grow that scene in George and grow the town with what we have to offer there, because it's so great. So I've done things like, we've taken over a little trail kiosk cafe there, and then it's mats and it's mountain bike events, and then I'm involved with Mount Co, which is like our outdoor gear shop there. So there's so many things. So I've actually at one stage just played around, and on my email signature I just said Chief Inspiration Officer. So like that's all I'm just here to give everybody inspiration and go. So like, I don't think I would necessarily put a fancy title. I'm not a person for a title. I'm in the end just a dirtbag trail runner and wants to enjoy the mountains.
I love that. And obviously, as I said, this is kind of an episode for mainly about discovering new routes. So, and I gave you the kind of the background. And what is the advice you would kind of give to someone who's, trying out, these kind of longer routes for the first time, and, possibly looking at exploring places they've never kind of explored before?
Just do it. I think it's an absolute privilege if you've got the health, you've got the fitness to be able to do it and get out into new places and run. It's an amazing experience. And I think most of your audience and yourself as well, you get that stoke level when running. And there's a different stoke from running a short race, and you like super chuffed and you're still good and you can still chat around. And then there's that level of absolute fatigue, finishing the over the line, you completely down, and you just feel that was epic, and I think that is really important for somebody that aspires to run, and whether that's in the mountains, on the road, or just like smaller trails and not big mountain running. It's just that sense of achievement and that endorphins that gets released while running. So for me, the advice is, obviously do your preparation and get ready. And I mean, we can dive into more about the preparation part, but, if you're going to show undercooked, you're going to hate it. There's a good chance that you're going to hate it. So like, be prepared, be ready, and then just dive into it and don't be scared. I mean, it's doable. That there's a reason that we have 500 athletes show up for a 60K or 45-kilometer race. It's doable. It's not unachievable. I think that's the important thing to understand. And even a big race like a miler, I know in South Africa we don't have like enough athletes yet that can toe the line of a miler, but it's growing, and I see more and more people aspire to that, but also more and more people being scared of that sort of distance. And I think something like that is just like, how do you eat elephants? Just, one bite at a time, and just look at your aid station to aid station. Don't look at the 160 Ks you have to run. Look at that sections that you have to do. Yeah, I love that, the elephant analogy. And we did chat about what inspired you to start the race. And I love the idea of how you've kind of grown the community around it. But obviously it's been quite quite an amazing last 7 years. But if you look back, what are the kind of key evolution points of the race? Yeah, I think we all, leading up to, we were building good momentum going into 2020, the year that no one wants to talk about, and up to that we were building good momentum into the race, and people were starting to get known about it. But then obviously COVID, and then after that we were like, okay, what's going to happen? Or are our numbers going to go down or up? And I think most people in this industry, it depends on where you were and what happened, but most people saw a spike. And we saw a spike in 21 and 22 with our race, and it really started getting up. And then I think obviously in 23, most people think it was sort of an overnight thing, but we negotiated and had loads of chats. It almost took a year and a half to 2 years for us to get to a point where we were happy with a UTMB a World Series alignment, and that then 23 was our first year that we presented under the UTMB flag, and being, it's something that I'm quite proud of, that we the only race on the African continent in the UTMB World Series, and we joined the team, and there was always like uncertainty. Like it's almost like taking on your first big race. You don't know what's going to happen, what's the plan, how much do we work with these guys, what's, how's it going to work. And I must say, the support level that we've received and the way they've still given us as the race directors the space to add our own flavor, keep our race what it has been, and Matt, and that was really been rewarding to work like that. And so I think the biggest turnaround for us was in 23 when we were part of UTMB World Series. 24, we moved the race from our sort of, I want to use the word romantic little race village that we had in the forestry station up, that's called Witfontein. I really loved that venue because that's where we started, and it had these big trees, and it was a nice venue, but we just outgrown it. Parking was an issue, water, electricity, all the normal event things. So in 24 was our first year at our stadium in the middle of the town of George. And that was a big move for us, and I think it worked really well. We've got a few new little tweaks for this year that will still be at the stadium, but we're changing the layout and the setup a bit more, that I'm excited for. And we'll see what 25 brings us with the mat. Yeah.
And you did say in the beginning you wanted it always to be like an international race, but did you ever envision that it would be part of the UTMB series?
No, I mean, like most trail runners coming through the ranks, running Otter, running UTCT, running all the other events, and just moving through, you always look at UTMB as that sort of almost unachievable goal as a trail runner. Like, I see the way that you have to enter and the lottery system and the whole thing, and I always thought, probably never going to happen in my lifetime to be able to go there and run that. So it was something that I never thought was possible. I wanted to have Matt on a high standard. That was always, that was a non-negotiable for us. So we always tried, and I mean, we all make mistakes, and maybe there was a few things as we learned and carried on that we didn't do exactly to international standard, but we definitely strived to be an international standard event. And I think that us South Africans we pretty good event organizers. Like the events we put on, and I mean, I don't have to mention all the names, but the events we put out in the South African space are world-class events. So I think it was a high bar to always match with those events, and it was a dream come true to be part of that series. I think it opened up a whole new sector for South African and trail running and for the sport in South Africa. Now we've already, I think this year at UTMB, we had 65 South Africans there that qualified via MAT to be able to do UTMB, so it's growing. We're seeing more people going. We've got our superstar athletes as well that are going, and I think South Africa is making their mark in the trail running scene globally, which is really exciting.
Yeah. And that evolution with UTMB, and perhaps, if you're comfortable talking about the new role, how they kind of got more integrated into the race, and what is the kind of the future, what is that looking like, that kind of vision?
Yeah, I think that, the integration, I think the one thing for the World Series is to find, each event needs to have its own quirky atmosphere and things that are to that area or that country or that culture, if you want to put it, but they are trying to maintain a quality so that when you race in George on the mat course, certain things that if you go to a race in Thailand or in the States or wherever, you can expect certain things to be the same. And it's simple things like the race guide, the layout. So like when you enter the miler for the mat, on page so much, this is going to be what my route profile looks like, and those sort of things. And when you get that thing online for the Thailand race, it's the same thing, you know. So it's just trying to standardize those little things is what UTMB World Series really works on, and having the quality of the signage, the information, and essentially the athlete experience. You know, that's really what they are trying to achieve. But the heritage of the race routes, the way the races work remains within the local team's sort of prerogative to put out, you know. So I think that's basically it out of a World Series point of view, and also to make it a lot more accessible and easier for people to get to the finals in Chamonix at UTMB. With the running stones and the UTMB index scoring and that whole system, I mean, I can explain that for you as well. I think for some people it's still like, what do I need to pick up stones while I'm running, or what is it? And then the second part of what's happening now with me is quite exciting and interesting. It's also very daunting for me, but I've obviously been working with the team for a while now, since we started getting mat together, and the opportunity came across my table to step up a bit more into the World Series, and I will be sort of helping out with the operations in 7 of the European events, and then 8th event will be mat. So I'll have 8 UTMB World Series events that I'll be working with. All of them still very much intact with their race directors and their on the ground teams and that sort of stuff, but it's more just helping those teams achieve the goals and working through the events. So it's quite an exciting and daunting thing for me, but so I'm starting with the first races in April in Croatia, the Istria by UTMB, and then it works all the way through the European events. And then finishing with the Kullamannen in Sweden in November, October, at the end of the year. Yeah.
Sure. It's going to be a busy time for you.
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to be the full June. I'll be in Europe. So finishing up with mat, and then going to the Mozart race in Austria directly after mat, and then going to the Andorra race and the Lavaredo, and then the Eiger in Switzerland. Yeah, so it's really nice and exciting races, big races.
Yeah.
So, and I think that comes back to, the South African sort of stamp going through into the scene. I'm hoping to learn a lot of things and see, what these big races do in the other parts of the world, and hopefully apply some of that into our own space in South Africa.
Sure. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Trail running beats up everything, your legs, your lungs, and especially your feet. The last thing you need is socks that give up before you do. That's why I'm thrilled to announce that this season of Trail Chasers is sponsored by Gilnockie Socks. These aren't just your run-of-the-mill socks. Gilnockie socks are made for people who demand more performance, more durability, and more comfort. They're designed to prevent blisters with premium moisture-wicking materials that keep your feet dry no matter how long or muddy the trail gets. Plus, they're treated with HydroCool and Silver Plus, so they stay fresh, breathable, and ready for your next adventure. Since I started using Gilnockie socks, I haven't had to stop mid-run to adjust or worry about discomfort. They just keep working mile after mile, run after run. So why settle for socks that don't keep up? Visit gilnockie.com and use the code TRAILCHASERS at checkout for 20% off your first order. Trust me, once you try them, you won't go back. Your feet will thank you. If you kind of exploring or you doing your kind of first like long race or whatever, and you get lost, what is the kind of the go-to? I mean, you should be prepared and you shouldn't get lost, but it always kind of happens, weather or things like that. What do you what do you do? I guess, I mean, you probably don't get lost because you've done adventure races and
No, I think getting lost is quite a big word, and just going off course is maybe that happens in trail running more often than but getting lost and not knowing your way back is quite a hectic situation to be in. But I think going off course does happen, unfortunately. I mean, we put in a lot of effort to mark our routes and trails, and I think in today's modern technology, most people run with their watches, with the GPX, especially the longer distance guys. But we still see it, and especially when there's a split ahead of routes, and when it's a lot of people get confused. It's a lot of hype. They're not sure what direction and that sort of thing. And it does happen. I think the best thing or best advice I can give on that topic is, like, when you start doubting yourself and things doesn't look right, you're not seeing markers for a while, is like, stop and figure that out and check. Don't go, oh no, it will be on the next corner. On the next corner, it's our typical way of and then you just go further and further down the wrong route. And also, like, is there runners around me? I think most of the time there will be somebody up ahead or back that you can spot that, okay, no, we're still on the right route. But yeah, then just stop taking out your phone and checking where you are. Are you on the race course? Phone the emergency number that's normally printed on the bibs, and just check, I'm here, this is what's happening, and rather be sure than carrying on down the wrong route. But 9 out of the 10 times you're pretty sure, after going down the route 2 or 3 Ks that okay, no, this doesn't make sense. So it's like, I always say when we brief back in the day, when we had proper race briefings before the event, always was saying, like, normal route finding skills is applicable. Like, you can't expect a route marker every 500 meters. I mean, with Matt, we've got about 280 kilometers of route to mark. It takes us about 3 weeks just to mark the route. There's no way we can put a flag or something every 500 meters for you to have a assertive point. So there's always going to be like, oh, what's happening here? This looks like the line, and I think that is a skill that trail runners really need to work on, is like, this looks like the most common traveled route, and it's a feeling. It's not something you can train for, but it becomes more, the more you do races, the more you like, no, this is obvious, this is where I have to go, type thing.
And moving into kind of exploring new trails, how to kind of find the different trails. When you're kind of starting out, how do you kind of recommend that beginners go about finding new trails or finding, places to run? They've obviously been running, say probably the same route over and over, and they want to kind of venture out. What is the kind of go-to in terms of finding those new routes?
For me, I think it's 2 things. It's like, find the community that runs there, find a mate that can take you somewhere on new spots. I think it's, trail running is an individual sport, but it is so much better shared with somebody on the trails, the stoic and that sort of stuff. So, like, with this tour we're currently doing in South Africa, going around with our Hobie and Oho tour, it's amazing how new people come into these run crews or communities or running groups, and then a new world's open to them. So I think, like, I would strongly recommend joining a group for one run, finding people that you sort of see as your pace, because that's also then easy. If you do one of those community runs, you see, okay, this is my pace, people try and figure out and run with those people and find new space. And then obviously the Strava thing. I mean, heat maps on Strava is pretty good to see where people are running and where the trails are going. I think that helps a lot. I'm definitely, if I'm traveling to a new place, that's pretty much what I do, is I just go onto my phone. Okay, that looks like where people run. I think I'm probably a bit more adventurous than most, so I don't mind just pointing into a direction and running and think like, okay, there must be a route somewhere up this peak or up that way, and I'll find my way. And if I don't, I'll just backtrack. But I think you do need to have a little bit of an adventurous spirit to go further off the beaten track. I mean, and the main reason why I started with finding a community or somebody to run with is safety. You know, safety is in numbers. Run with somebody that knows, like, that's a no-go zone, or this is where you can go, that sort of thing. That really helps.
And going into that kind of safety element, things obviously as you get further and longer, things kind of do get a bit more remote, a bit more technical. So is it kind of advice of, if it kind of gets to that point, backtrack and kind of, go back down, or is it kind of, are there ways to kind of mitigate, that when you're exploring a remote technical area for the first time?
Yeah, I think that is depending on your skill set, like, and your confidence. I think, but we're talking about, this topic is about newbies or people wanting to explore further. And I think that as soon as it gets that sort of, I've been in situations where a space blanket has saved my life. And I think if you don't have that understanding and that thinking about mountains, especially mountains, weather can change so quickly. I really do believe that, people underestimate that, especially in South Africa, because we don't have alpine mountains with snow and all of those things. So people don't think of the mountains as being a dangerous place. But I think it's evident, and the evidence is out there about really harsh conditions in all of our mountains, in Table Mountain, Etinika with us, obviously the Berg. So my suggestion is, like, know your limits. When you start feeling uneasy, the weather's coming in or something is uneasy, I would rather say backtrack and try another day, make that a goal to go further and figuring out your capability. And then, it's an old thing for race directors to say, like, the compulsory gear. But I still, like, I've got a little bag, dry bag that's always in my running vest, and it's just got the basic stuff that you would get onto a event thing that you have to have with you. And I'm like a firm believer of running with that type of gear always. You never know what happens. And even with me taking my kids into the mountains now, it's like I'm drilling that into them, explaining to them, like, before we go, like, do the check. How much water do you have? Do you have some food? Do you have those things? It's like making sure it's like part of what you do, even though, okay, it's a sunny day, it's going to be fine. I'm only going to do 10Ks, but I'm going to that peak. It's still something that's really good to, like, sort of train yourself, having the gear, having everything ready. And it's like I say always, it's not about when everything goes well, you don't need it. And that's the little bag you never want to open. But when things go wrong, that's when you need it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
and what are the other kind of things to keep in mind when starting out, when going on these kind of things? You've kind of mentioned the safety blankets and having that kind of kit, but are there any other things that people should kind of bear in mind?
Yeah, I've always got a running joke with some of my more exploring mates before we go, is like, how much food must I pack for this mission? It's like, depending, like, always, I think my wife is always like, I say, no, I'll be back in 3 hours. And then she says, oh, you're not going to be back in 3 hours. It's like, it's also being honest with yourself and knowing, like, I think, like, the planning before you go, okay, maybe it's a 3-hour run or a 2-hour run, but give yourself another hour because things might just go other way around. So I think it's like communicating to your family about where you're going, what you're doing. Is like, I always make a point of just saying, I'm going into that direction. Like, even if we're in a new spot or camping, then at least I tell my wife, I'm going to try and do that peak or going for that point. And then she knows if there's a search party, like, you went that way, type thing. Headlamps. I also got lost or things gone wrong, or you run out of energy and then the night falls, and then at least you've got that backup. I'm talking about longer exploration now, obviously, but headlamps, have a plan, communicate that plan before you go with somebody, even if it's just a WhatsApp about, I'm doing this is my plan. And then just enough water and drink, eat, food.
Yeah, those are the really important things, and it's important for kind of people to, not rush into things. It's kind of like stop, do the checklist, take the time, rather than just going for it.
No, it's very important, and I think we all get, especially if you've been doing it for a while and longer, you get like numb to it and you don't think about it. But also, like what I've developed for myself with most of my running vests or my proper backpacks, if it's a longer adventure, is like I've got a little sequence of what pockets has what, like, and it's imprinted in my brain. So like I know my pocket knife's here, this is there, that's there, and then when you have it all on, you just tap and you're like, okay, everything's there. And like when you're in this situation, you reach for the gel here, and it's like it's even good advice for running a race. It's like have the same pocket for the gel every time and have the same pocket for the bar, so that when you 100 Ks into the race and your brain doesn't function anymore, like it's autopilot. Gels are here, bars are here, anti-chafe cream is there, or whatever it might be, like having that little system. And then also it's easy when you do a training run, like all those stuff are in place and you just go.
And in terms of your own personal, when you're out there and you hit a fork in the kind of road, are you going well trodden path, or are you going the one that looks like it's a bit of an adventure? And then obviously for newbies as well, what is the kind of recommended, the safest kind of option?
The recommended safest option is always the most trodden part. I think it really, to be brutally honest, it depends on my mood, because I think most days the adventurous route will appeal to me. But as I'm getting older, I've also realized that sometimes it's just nice to be on the normal route and finish within a respectable time. Nobody's angry at me because I've said I was going to be out for 2 hours and now it's 6 hours and I'm not back yet, especially family, kids growing up and that sort of thing. So I must say, like nowadays when I get to those points, there is that like, yes, that looks kiff, but maybe let's just stick to this route and it's safe. But every now and again the more adventurous route appeals, and then you give it a bash. Normally results in some legs being cut open by fangboss or something. But
And moving into that first long race, I think you're obviously in the quite unique position of having done long races and the adventure races, but also obviously organizing long races. So when beginners kind of prepare for their first long race, what are the kind of key things you should look at in terms of that preparation?
Yeah, I think it's like with anything, it's doing the time. And I think we're in an age where almost everybody's got a coach or some advice platform or something like that. And I mean, it really works. It helps if you've got somebody looking over what you're doing and giving you a bit more structured approach. I've seen it a lot of times is like when I'm just mumbling around and I get somebody to help me for a little bit with structure, it does make a difference. I think that it helps to have that second eye on what you're doing. But if that's not your thing, it's still just important to put the time in and also to do what you think. Like if you're not going to enter an ultra and think you're going to run every single kilometer of an ultra. It's like in trail running, that's almost unheard of, especially if you're a newbie moving through. It's only like the top 5% of the field that will run every single section. So also don't go out and train only 10Ks at a time, running at high pace or high intensity, and then on race day you don't know what to do when you're walking, because now you feel like, oh shit, I'm not going to finish cutoffs because now the big climb I'm walking. But that is part of trail running. That's also the beauty of trail running. Like you can get by walking the big hills and finishing the race. So like simulate what you think is going to be on the race day is one advice, and then consistency. It's like rather do the 5K that you've got time for than skipping the workout because life's too hectic, like work and family commitments and that sort of thing. And now I planned a 2-hour run today or whatever, and now I can't do it because time is. But then just do that quick half an hour. Like just do it. The consistency is more important than knocking off the long runs.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to do a big long distance race, you need to be conditioned in terms of your mind, your feet, and chafe and all of those things by spending one day. You don't have to run a single kilometer. You can hike, do like a big 3-4 hour hike to the mountains, just to like do a mind conditioning of what it takes to be out there for a 6-hour race,
Yeah.
So that's my sort of advice.
Yeah, I think that time thing is very important. And we've chatted in an earlier episode with a coach, about how in trail running you kind of switch over to time as opposed to distance, and how, as you've kind of said, it's so important to have that time out there as opposed to being able to run fast for 5Ks or something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And obviously as someone who's involved in a race, and what are the kind of important things in a race that people should be practicing other than obviously the training, things like pacing, things like, your nutrition, things like that? What are the other things that you're going to experience in a race that you should be, in a kind of your first long run that you should be practicing?
Yeah, I think if I look at the DNF results of our race and most races, I think one of the biggest DNF results come from nutrition. It's like people getting it wrong or trying to do new things on race day. And that is, now it's like all the stress. You either traveled there with some mates and you look at their food parcel and they've got like 20 gels and you only pack 2 because you're not used to using gels. Now you go to the expo and you buy 20 gels and you chow all the gels in the first hour, and it's being, if while I'm saying that, you think that should be common sense, but it does happen. I see it often happening where people get over excited and then think, okay, no, but this is the way the other athletes are doing. So like, I think for me, the nutrition part's probably the biggest thing that you need to train for racing, and sticking to your guns, like sticking to what you used to, like what you're eating on training runs or normally at home. Like if you oats or a muesli type of oat in the morning, or you're a bacon and egg guy in the morning, that's what you need to simulate on race day. Don't like upset your tummy with new and different things on race day. So like find your rhythm and I mean, your breakfast might be different from a normal Saturday morning. If you're not training you're getting up at 5 and you're running early, then you want to simulate that same scenario in the race day and like back yourself. Like I've done a big run on just a bowl of oats in the morning, that sort of thing is what you don't now go and, okay, now I have to have oats, a smoothie, 3 coffees, and like just bomb your system. It's not gonna work. And then on race day, I think there's a lot of information and a lot of technology out there. I mean, most watches can sync to a nutritional plan with like a reminder of how many calories per hour, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of information out there, and I really do think it's important to make sure you are getting enough in every hour, but not necessarily overdoing that or like breaking your head. If you don't feel like you can have something else to eat, then you need to know you're like either overfueling or trying to plan that thing. So I mean, I'm by no means a nutritional expert or anything, but I've seen it happen with myself. Is like the reason why I want to stop or pull out in a race is normally because either poor nutrition or over nutrition.
And it's, I guess, also the one thing we don't train,
we don't train because you don't put yourself into that scenario often, so it's also it's something that you train the more races you do. But I think like, and then also realizing it's okay that like, especially in ultra distance, it's okay to have hour where you're not feeling okay. It's going to happen. It's like, that is going to happen. And I mean, there's a little bit of a video on the 6 Peaks in George circulating at the moment on social media that we as a whole bunch of mates did on the 2nd of Jan for a little bit of a new route launch. And we had somebody brought us up some chow at the about 90% into the route, so we only had about 20% of the route to still go. And I had a burger and drank all sorts of things, and it was like celebrating and everything, and like 10 minutes down the road everything came up. And then you're like, oh shit, is this now the end? I'm not going to finish it. All of those thoughts come through your mind, and it's like, okay, it's out now, let's just walk it out, drink a bit, just plain water, and then you carry on. It's like also having to like ease yourself and saying like, it's okay, I'm gonna be okay, these things happen. So nutrition is probably for me is the one thing that will stand out. There's many other things, but socks, blister sort of prevention, that sort of thing, chafe is a big thing.
And we did touch on it a little bit, but what are the kind of biggest mental challenges people face entering these kind of long runs or long races for the first time? And what strategies do you have, personally, that you kind of recommend to get through those?
I think the mentally side is always going to be like wanting to tell that third person in your head telling you to stop. This is not good for you. You're going to get injured, or you won't be able to run after this again because you've, you got some injury, or and I think that is mentally is always going to be the toughest part of continuing and telling yourself it's going to be okay and we'll find your rhythm again. And I think that's probably where it sits. It's like getting that mental sort of space of preparation and being okay with doing the distance. I think that's where it is for me.
That's some kind of excellent kind of race day advice. And I want to go back to kind of looking at a trail run, and in your role as race director, and I suppose we can maybe even talk about a specific edition on that. But in the morning of a race, if like you have terrible weather and the route becomes, like a key section of the route becomes inaccessible, or, you have some doubts about a section or something like that. Do you improvise? Do you reroute, or do you kind of know we're sticking with the plan? And I suppose you can talk about when was it last? No,
it was 2023 was a proper mud fest. People asked me to change the T to D, for Matt. I think that it's always like we do have A, B, and C routes on most of our courses. There's sections, mountain passes, or sections on the route that you can't bypass. So, or you can. There's always a plan. So we've got that would be like a C route. But I think in the essence and the spirit of racing and trail running, going into the mountains, we try to stick out on the courses that we intended to be there as far as possible always, and like this only last resort is rerouting and changing, but those decisions are purely made on safety. So it's a safety call on what's happening with the route as the weather changed. Is there whatever other elements come into play for those points to come in, and we pre-set up like targets of if it reached that point, then we need to do that. I think with Matt specifically, I think there's a few routes and places where we've got options to tweak and to change the race route. But I think, and we obviously with the miler, for instance, we go up to the high peaks. But most of the route in terms of weather is okay. It depends on where you're going to go. And I think like on that specific mud fest, if we want to call it, we had the weather on the race day was perfect. It was just the week leading up to the race, we had lots of rain, and it was that perfect scenario of sun shining onto the wet mud and making it that very sticky sort of sucking in mud, and that just made it really hard. But in my point of view, it was never a real safety risk. It just made everybody slower and it was tougher going, which I mean is not what we want. It was unfortunate, but it's trail running in the end, but we've if I can talk to another race discipline with Transpavillons, we had 1 year where it was just -degrees and we had to evacuate like 300 cyclists in a very short space of time. And that sort of thing you need to plan for and understand what the protocols are and how do you do that. And it's always a difficult situation to be in with weather as a race director, but all of those calls are purely based on safety concerns for our runners or our athletes.
Yeah. And what other mistakes do you see kind of beginners or first-time long runners kind of make, I suppose, also in terms of weather and gear? You know, we've talked a bit about the nutrition, but maybe in terms of weather and gear and preparedness.
Yeah, I think that, once again, I think I said it earlier, is the compulsory gear checklist that we give as the race is so important, and we won't put things there that is unnecessary. I think it's always a debate like, do I really have to have waterproof pants? Do I really have to have a base layer and a mid layer and that sort of thing? And it's once again comes down to, it's okay, you're probably going to put that into a Ziploc bag, that base layer, and you're never going to take it out until the finish. And in my mind, then you had a good race and that's great. But the thing is, what happens when you fall or you're injured and you can't move further on and you sit there and you get cold, well, then you need that gear. So I think the biggest mistake is people trying to skimp on the compulsory gear, and then if they are in a situation where they really need it, then only the light bulb goes off and like, oh shit, I do actually need that tape seam waterproof jacket. There's a reason for that thing. So, and I mean, gear is expensive. I get that and I understand that, and it's a barrier to entry for some people. But there's, I think there's a wide range of choices out there at the moment that also fits a bit more of a pocket. You don't have to go and buy the top end rain jacket. The middle one with tape seams will still do the job, And I think that it is just don't listen to the guide and get that stuff, be ready for it. And then I think what mistakes people make with gear is like also not wanting to use it. Like when you're running and you're cold, but I'll stick it out for a little bit more, and you stick it out for a little bit more, and it carry on, and then you don't, like, you've got the jacket, just put it on, run with it for half an hour, get yourself warm, ready, feel up again, take it off, put it back, and carry on. That's the sort of thing. Like, use the gear, don't just let it be in your backpack. Maybe that's a typical mistake as well.
And obviously going through this race, a lot of people, this will kind of be like the longest run or race that they've kind of done. What advice do you kind of give on properly pacing so you don't burn out, and also properly ensuring that you're fueling and hydrating? Obviously a lot of people are like, they don't hydrate or they don't fuel until it's too late. So what advice do you kind of give to ensure that you're throughout, especially when you're not, as you say, when you're not feeling cold or you're not feeling tired, what is the, how does before the light bulb, I guess, goes off?
Yeah. I think the biggest mistake is when we all do it. I mean, I still do it as well. When the stoke levels are high and you're flying around the course and everything is great and you're chatting to people, you tend to forget to eat and drink, or to manage whatever needs managing because you're having the time of your life. So I think it's important. What I've always done is like I would set a little alarm on my watch for every hour. Just beep, beep. Okay, do a little sense check. When last did I eat? When last did I drink? So like generally, I think most nutritional plans work on an hour segment. For endurance is like have that hour alarm going off. Okay, Have I had enough in the last hour? Have I drank enough in the last hour? And then you also get reminded about that, even if it's when you're feeling good, you know. Pacing is I'd still get it wrong every time, you know. So it's a difficult thing to it depends on the course and that sort of thing. I think for me, sometimes it's just finding that one guy that you can run with that, you know, and he might also, or she might also get it wrong. But then at least you're running with somebody and moving efficiently. But that's also can be that you're going too slow because now you're sticking to this person going up the hill, but you've actually got a bit more. So it's like always measuring where you are and what you're doing. And I think, you know, it's maybe just pre-planning and saying like, okay, I want to be at that aid station at that sort of time, and then not breaking your back if you don't reach it, but then, you know, get there and okay, I'm like within half an hour or within 10 minutes of that sort of goal, I'm good, carry on, you know, but also be realistic when you put those things out. But yeah, it's pacing is like, looking at the technology that you've got available to do it as well, having your watch and setting your targets there. But it's in trail running, I think especially, it's more difficult than others, especially with climbing. And if you're not sure like what your capacity is to climb. So it's really a feeling in my mind. Anyway.
Yeah. And, you know, going back to the kind of the race directing, what is the first thing you do when you finish, you know, MUT? Every year you're done, wrapped up, everything's kind of been taken care of. What is the first thing, you know, you're doing? Is it a beer? Is it a sleep? Is it I
open a beer.
Yeah.
And a few after that. No, when that last runner crosses the line, you know, all your ergs are accounted for, all your athletes are in, everybody is safe, then it's just celebrate. You know, it's like, it's such a good feeling. You know, the race has been pulled off. You sit down. We've basically been doing it for the last 3 years. We try to get all our crew and volunteers and everybody in, and we just sit under the arch on the floor there and we drink a beer. You know, I think that is really like a cool thing to do, and that's definitely what I do. And then only the next day I start worrying about packing up.
And how do you do the debrief, like quite quickly so it's still fresh, or is it kind of?
Yeah, I think we leave a bit of time. I would say a couple of days for everything to settle in and to refresh your memory of what's going on. And I sort of start making my notes about things that went wrong so that you don't forget it. And then I also always asked, we call them like our captains of each area, and we ask them for their feedback of where we can improve and that sort of. So you sort of collate all the information about the event and things where we can go better. It is important to do it as quickly as possible so that it's fresh, but also give it a bit of time for some of the things to process, because typically, like anything, you will have one thing go wrong, and then you think it's the end of the world during the race day, but then if you look at it hindsight, it was actually insignificant, you know. So it's like just finding the priorities of what's important to change as well, you know.
And if someone comes up to you at like registration, or maybe even on like one of these tours, and they're like, I'm doing my first long race at MUT, you know, what is the one thing you're telling them?
Good luck. It's a difficult one. It depends on what they're doing and where they're coming from. But I think the one thing that I always try and highlight and try and tell people is just like, enjoy it. You know what I mean? You've put in the effort, you've paid the money, you're gonna enjoy it. It's like, just remember to enjoy it, because I think typically it's such a daunting task. People get so overwhelmed with all the statistics, and we've been going through it in this whole interview now, is like the pacing, the food, all of those. It gets a lot. So like my advice always in that space of when somebody asks me is like, just like enjoy the process as well. It should be fun, you know. As soon as the sport for the majority of us becomes a a burden, then you shouldn't be doing it. Like, just enjoy the process.
Yeah. And for you, what's the most rewarding thing, I guess, about running or trail running that keeps you coming back, but then also, about organizing races, and, why have you kind of wanted to get more involved, and get more races under your belt? What is that for you?
I think for me, it's like seeing that sense of achievement in runners crossing the line. Like, it doesn't always sink in, or it doesn't always like come, naturally to me, to realizing when somebody finishes a 20K or a 60K, that's been like a lifelong goal for a person. And you can see that emotion when they cross the line, and sometimes it's sad of joy, or, there's different emotions, but people really, events that we put on, we like Matt is a good point or case in point, where it was just really a passion for running in those mountains and running those trails, but then it becomes an aspiration for people, and then when they finish it, is that sense of achievement. And I think it's that like getting people to dream about something impossible and then achieving it and seeing that sensation. That is such a cool thing to witness and see, and sort of play a small role in for people in their journeys, and I think that is probably why I would always want to be in this space and organize epic adventures for people to find their journey and their space to do, and I think even in my own sort of capacity, I'm always looking at little unpaddled rivers or things that are unexplored before, and taking mates, even if it's just a group of 5 people, to go and experience it, and like show them or give them the opportunity to do something that they've never done. And I think that's really where it's at for me, and for myself as well, is like that stoke of exploring what's possible. I think I remembered the very first adventure race that I did. We came off I think it was like 100K trek leg on our feet for over 20 hours, and then taking off the backpack, taking off my trekking kit, and putting on cycling bibs for a 200K cycle leg. And I was like, how did my mind shift from doing that? Normally, if I would come off 100K trekking leg, I'll be dead for 2 weeks and don't want to get out of bed. Now I'm putting on cycling shorts to go and ride another 20 hours, so it's like, and it's that mind shift of achievement, I think that's really the part of that I enjoy and why I keep on doing.
And why would you say everyone has to do MUT at least once, but probably at least 10 times? Keep coming back.
I think that it's very underrated, the mountains that we've got there. I think that Georgia's always been that sort of spot where people go do their shopping when they're holidaying in Mossel Bay or Knysna. It's like, it's just that quick trip into town to get the shopping and things. And I think that the mountain there has never been like really exposed to this sort of space, and once you're in it, you can understand it. And it's like we are a city, but you within half an hour you elevated and out of the city, and you're in proper remote wilderness mountains. And I think that that's very rare to find in our modern society and the world still. And it's just epic running, and I feel like everybody should just come and experience that once, that sort of running in mountains that are wild, I think that I've always joked, there's one section on the mountain, on the Myla route that is called Bergplaats. And I say, like, there's probably baboon and leopard in that section that's never seen human life, so like they're so secluded in that mountain section. So it's just come and experience that space. I think that's what it's.
And
Tunnelbos, it's got like we did a couple of training runs in December, or for the trail runs that we hosted, like as fundraisers, and we saw I was running with a guy, and he said, "Oh, is this tunnels?" And I said to him, "Yes." He said, "No, I can't go in here." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "No, I still got PTSD from the race, And I think in the race it is different. To me, tunnels is like my outdoor church, if you want to put it there. Like, it just really, if you stand there and you look at these big alder trees and stinkwood trees and things, it's such a magical little forest space. So it's really special. It is rooty and technical, and it's a tough section to finish with, but that's what Matt's about.
And what does the future look like of Matt? I mean, this year, what are the big things, and then obviously going forward?
I think we always will strive to improve and find things that we can improve on and trying to increase it. I think it will be our second year now in the stadium to finish, and we're going to make a few tweaks there. So it's like ironing out that finish venue and making sure it works and accommodates everybody. And we're making a few little tweaks on the routes, not major, a few things that also will make it easier and flow. But the routes are, set. And I think for us, it was always important moving the venue and changing the start and finish sections of the routes is to now find stability in those routes with those times, and people can plan according to that. And we completely changed the 25K route from 23 to 24, and it's now finding in the next 5 years the sort of sustainability of those routes and making sure they work and they are really good for everybody to enjoy. For this year, it's those things. We've got some more international guys. All the big name sort of athlete managers are starting to talk to us about who's coming, who's not coming. I don't actually really know, as I'm sitting here, which elite athletes we are going, and hopefully in the near future we'll get more of the really big Jim Walsley type names to the event. That's always the aspiration, to get those pro athletes, to come and join us in on the mat. And I think, for us, one aspiration for Matt is to become a major, which is there's only 4 majors in the world as part of the UTMB World Series at the moment, and that we still need to do a few things for us to be able to achieve that. But that is sort of the long-term bigger plan, is to have a major on African and, more importantly, South African soil.
Sure. And I asked at the beginning, what are the 2 words that you'd have on your socks? So what would they be?
I had an idea and then I've lost it. So it's like I don't know, like look up.
Yeah, I like that one.
Look
That's
up,
brilliant.
like don't always just slog. Like look up and just enjoy the views, because most of the places where you will go in trail running, you will have a view. So look up.
Amazing. I love that. So going from, so you've now kind of chosen your long race, and, you immediately like, wow, I've got like this really long race in 6 months' time. What is the best piece of advice you'd give someone, to start working towards that goal? In terms of, what do they have to do, or what is the...
I think the biggest advice is, like, for me, and I'm probably directing this more to myself, is that you've set the goal, you've entered, and then you sort of park it, and then you carry on with your normal life. So for me, it's like actually acknowledging that you've entered and you're there now. So now start doing the work early. Like, don't leave it in that last month, like, oh shit, the race is around the corner and now I have to train. And then you do panic training and you get injured and you make mistakes. So it's like, you've made the commitment in advance to like enter, so now make the commitment in advance to start training, and I think find that consistency and build it slowly, but commit to the process, because the process is the beauty of it.
Exactly.
That is what is so enjoyable of this sport.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Dean. Thanks for having me, and good luck with your endeavors with the podcast. It's a really cool thing that you're doing. So good luck.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Subscribe to the Trail Chasers today and ensure that you never miss an episode. And if you know someone thinking about starting trail running, Share this with them. It might be the nudge they need to join you.